right, everybody, welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. Now, for any of you who are here for the first time or who are watching on YouTube for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. If you're not familiar with us, we here at Route Consultant, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and line haul. And today, really, we're focused on helping current contractors in the space understand all of the macro changes affecting their market and also find ways to be more profitable and successful. And then those of you who are new and trying to enter this market for the first time, we really want to make sure you know exactly what you're getting into, that you go in eyes wide open, and that we're always here to answer any questions that come up over time. Now, before I go too much farther, I do have a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Now, for everyone who's here today, just as a reminder, we will have a Q&A session at the end where any questions that come up from what we talk about today, feel free to submit questions on. You can also submit it while we're talking. It's just, for the most part, I'll try to get to those at the end once we're done kind of going over everything we want to talk through today. But if you do have those questions, there's a button at the bottom of the window, a Q&A button that you can click on and submit it to us. Also, if you're watching later, if you have any questions that come up, obviously we won't be there live to answer it, but you can always email info@routeconsultant.com any of the questions that may come up from this webinar, and we're always happy to answer there. Or if you come to the next webinar, you can save it for then. So other than that, I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. So we are at the exciting time of the year in line haul where everyone has received their new TSP agreements. They're reviewing it, making sure they understand how it's changed, if at all, and how their rates may have changed. So today, what we've done is we've brought Alex Froome back on to talk through those changes, things you need to be aware of as we head into the new contract. So Alex, I see you there. Why don't you say hi, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hey, everybody. How you guys doing?
All right. It is good to have you, Alex. I see you're traveling. It's good to have you wherever you may find yourself in the world.
I think the great thing about being a line haul contractor or a TSP as opposed to an ISP is that I can really do my job from anywhere in the world. I'm currently in Annapolis, Maryland right now. My daughter's on an official visit at a college. So, this is where life takes me, and I can do my job from here. So
yeah, fun times. Yeah. And how is Maryland right now? Is it, I assume, still hot? Everywhere's hot.
sweltering hot. I mean,
Yeah.
coming from Colorado where I live and the dry air, and coming to Maryland where I feel like I've stepped into a shower or a sauna.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no, a steam room. I guess a sauna's dry, so it would be a steam room. It's just overwhelmingly hot and wet, and I almost want to say moist, and I'm just uncomfortable with it compared to Colorado and the dryness.
Yeah. Yeah. Always fun as a first visit to really get a taste of what the weather's going to be like, to make sure that she doesn't have any false notions of what to expect when she's out.
I have to say that, I mean, you couldn't get a better day. It's a bluebird day.
Yeah.
The water looks gorgeous. It's got a light breeze. Other than it's like 97 and swampy, it's a great day. So
Yeah. From inside, out looking out the window, it looks beautiful, right?
I mean, I prefer Army, honestly. I think Army is almost always a better choice, but and I'll tell my
No
daughter,
bias. Yeah.
but, I have no bias, and I'm very excited and very proud of my daughter.
Yeah. That's awesome. Perfect. So, like I said, we're going to talk through the TSP agreement, but before we get to that, there was a quick story that you and I were talking about that I just wanted to kind of talk about. So there was a ruling around Amazon that I think came out. Did you get a chance to see that and kind of see what happened?
So I did, and it's a very interesting ruling, and I really recommend everybody should to Google it to understand, what are the conditions that we operate in as TSPs, or on the P&D side as ISPs, or on the Amazon side as DSPs. At the end of the day, we employ drivers or pickup and delivery drivers, and I employ truck drivers who are then, and I'm contracted to FedEx, and they perform certain services for FedEx. FedEx has a number of rules and requirements and restrictions, as the TSP says, But at the end of the day, these are my employees and they're not Amazon or FedEx employees. And so this ruling really gets to the point of that, of understanding the contracting model that we employ. And, some of these bigger companies have had challenges in the past where they've exerted too much control. And this is just a reminder of that. And, as we'll talk about in the TSP, there are a number of reminders and a number of clarifications where it says specifically that, these are Alpha Kilo's employees. That's my company. These are Alpha Kilo's employees and not FedEx employees. And they reminded over and over again, they reminded. But yeah, this is a ruling, and I expect that you will see further clarification coming down from both Amazon and probably from FedEx in light of this, just reminding contractors that, hey, these are your employees, they're not our employees.
Yeah, and for those, like Alex said, I'd encourage you to go read that and understand the context. But it's all kind of coming out of that swelling unionization bubble over at Amazon, where they're trying to make it work for Amazon warehouse employees. Hasn't been super successful, but one of the other arms of this movement was kind of seeing how that might play out for drivers of DSPs, the subcontracted drivers. And that is not, this is not a ruling that says that unionization is allowed, but more of something that it opens a door for a further conversation or a further lawsuit if someone was to take it there. So it's more about, exactly like Alex said, I think it's really important as contractors in this community to understand the context of how all of this happens. This is a similar context to where FedEx was years ago when there was a lawsuit that kind of sparked the current model, the ISP transition that we're in now. And so just, you should always be aware of it as any kind of contractor, especially as a DSP contractor. And any kind of effort, unionization or any kind of overhaul to the contract would take a while, and it would involve multiple lawsuits. It's not like tomorrow you can expect the DSP model to fall apart. It's not that kind of change, but it is really worth being aware of as a DSP or potential DSP, but also as anyone operating in this environment. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the contract did change. This isn't saying that if the DSP model changed, that there would be no DSP model, but it's kind of saying that, when you've got a new contract format, if there is something that ever did happen to that scale in the Amazon space, there will be a lot of change. It will be a shakeup, and it is something that when you're thinking about being a player in this last mile delivery space, whether you're directly involved or tangentially involved as a FedEx contractor, that will affect the marketplace. So paying attention to these types of things are really important so that you can know how the market is evolving, changing over time, that you're able to plan for these things as they get, farther down the line, as opposed to just reacting and being surprised whenever something happens. So, yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway to understand through this whole process, and once you read the article, and I would highly recommend that everybody Google Amazon/NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board. So if you Google those two words in the same Google search bar, you're going to find this article. Bloomberg has a really good synopsis on it, but also FreightWaves and a couple other. But it's a great article, and it really goes back to the point of why I think every contractor, every businessman who's in business with FedEx, and I would say this is for Amazon people as well, though I don't know the Amazon DSP model that well. You really need to read the contract and understand what are your rights and your protections and your obligations under this, because it's very clear, and everybody knows that we are not allowed to have 1099 employees. All our employees have to be W-2. But this gets to the point and to the crux of the matter and explains in the TSP, and I'm sure it's for the ISP as well, why it's important to know that your employees have to be W-2 and not 1099, and why my company, as an S Corp, Alpha Kilo Logistics Inc., is a 1099 contractor of FedEx. And so it's my corporation that is the subcontractor, and then my corporation employs a number of employees who are mine, and I am responsible for from a workers' comp, from an insurance, from a tax and liability reporting purposes to FedEx.
Yeah. And I think that, so the what is really important, of knowing exactly what the contract says. And at minimum, you need to know that. But the more you understand the why of why, the context that generates these contracts, it helps you understand how FedEx might enforce them, why they might enforce them a certain way, and what really FedEx is going for, so that you can think through business decisions and planning when you're ever in those kind of gray areas, to really know what FedEx is trying to protect themselves from, and how you should structure your business accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, and the biggest thing to understand with the contract is that your day-to-day person that your company is dealing with is probably a hourly employee that might have somewhere between 2 and 5 years worth of experience at FedEx, makes somewhere between $25 and $30 an hour, and has never seen the ISP contract or the TSPA, which is Transportation Service Provider Agreement. So they've never seen it, never looked at it. And what they're doing is they're making decisions based on what is easiest for them to make sure that they get their freight out the door or they get their packages delivered to a location. Okay, so they're not, they might be told over and over again that this is the way we do business. And they might say, okay, if I cut this corner, I'm going to save myself 15 minutes. And you need to understand that your job as as the owner of your business is to understand the TSPA or the ISPA and say, hey, this is not what the contract says. No, I'm not going to do this. Or no, I don't have to do this. These are the reasons why. And if you want to try to do this to me, then I need you to put it in writing so you as a contract owner, as a business owner, are protected. And then you can also go to the senior manager and say, hey, do you know your business is doing this, which is in direct violation of the contract? And you know what's going to happen? Every single time that senior manager is going to come down and say, hey, we need to do things the way the contract says, not the way that's easier for us, because the contract protects not only you, but FedEx from lawsuits. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure that they get the services delivered, the contracted services that they were asking us as contractors to provide in an efficient and safe manner, but also in a legal manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so important to know your rights and kind of know where you stand. And I think, I talk to people all the time where I'm trying to help them understand, what they can and can't do in certain situations, and how to best talk to senior management to kind of lay out what they know they should, or what they don't realize they should be able to do in the situation, and push back. And I think your point is extremely important, that just because a senior man, or just because the person you're interacting with at FedEx says something, doesn't mean that it is 100% true to the contract. And so it is ultimately view the contract as a source of truth, and use that in conversations with FedEx if needed.
Yeah, I mean, the clearest point is on when you need to provide a letter of assurance, and when you don't need to provide a letter of assurance. Like if you've been given an opportunity to cure, then yes, you need to provide a letter of assurance. And there is a very specific procedures that you need to follow, and a specific timeline that you need to follow in those procedures. But at like FedEx is coming to say, hey, I need you to provide me with a letter saying that you're not going to get into an accident again. Me as a TSP, I wouldn't do that. It doesn't say anything in the contract that I need to do that. I'll usually go back and say, are you giving me an opportunity to cure? Is that what this is? Are you saying that I'm tier 2 or tier 1 safety? No, we're not doing that. So then why are you asking for this? Those are the conversations you as a contractor need to have with FedEx. And make sure that you protect your rights, because you don't want to give them any more than you need to. But at the same time, you need to give them exactly what FedEx is requesting in the contract.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So while
talk
we're
about
talking about the contract, yeah. So before we get into kind of some of the changes, when they first announced and first kind of showed the draft a few weeks ago, it wasn't exactly received overly well, or overly positively.
So the process is kind of weird of how the TSPA happens. So, okay, so let's go back. So in the line haul side, we are called Transportation Service Providers. So we are TSPs for short, and we have an agreement. So we have a Transportation Service Provider Agreement, or a TSPA. So the question to ask yourself here is that how does the process work? We don't get to negotiate or look at the contract ahead of time. We get, as opposed to the ISP model, we get a slide deck. This year's was 70 slides, and a service provider solutions representative which used to be a BDS, but now is Service Provider Solution, or SPS, will read through it and do a conference call where he's walking through the slides. And more often than not, he's given the slides and he's given nothing else. And so he's just reading through the slides, and he hopefully has some idea about the reasons why we're making those changes, but generally he doesn't. But anyways, we don't actually get the contract until, I think the contract this year was released to us on August 15th. And we weren't able actually to sign it until August 18th. But meanwhile, we are getting the slides, pretty much from the last week of July going forward. So there was a clause that was in the contract initially. It was in Schedule G, Section 2.3B, that I'll read it. It says, willful, intentional, reckless, criminal, and or grossly negligent acts or omissions by TSPs or TSP agents, servants, employees, or subcontractors in the operations of a CMB or whole otherwise assigned to provide services under this agreement. So that just sounds like a clause that was added to the contract. What does that mean? So you have to understand, what is Schedule G? Schedule G is the insurance and indemnification portion of the contract. And what this was saying was that FedEx was going to remove our indemnification in the event that a driver was determined to be any of those. Now, the problem with that clause was that it caused us business owners to have unlimited liability in the event of an accident. And it's something that we can't get insurance for because we operate under FedEx's DOT authority. It's FedEx's job to provide insurance or indemnification in this. We cannot get supplementary insurance. We can't get optional insurance. So when you look at this is an unlimited liability that corporation has. And our banks, turned around and said to us, well, if you have this clause in your business, this is a risk that we don't want to finance. We're just not going to finance you anymore. So full stop. That means if I can't finance a truck, I can't buy trucks. If I can't buy trucks, I can only stay in business as long as I have the cash available to buy new trucks. So I need to have a smaller business. There's a lot of different things. So anyways, a number of us contractors raised this issue up to Service Provider Solutions, and facilitated a call with senior management. And we spoke to senior management and said, hey, this is the issue. And they're like, well, that wasn't our intent. I'm like, well, the language is the language. We can't help how the bank reads a legal contract. Your intent might have been something else, but this is what the banks are saying is the plain reading of this language. So, and they were very responsive. They said, thank you for the call. I believe we had the call on a Wednesday, and by Friday, they made an announcement that we got actually notification, I think Thursday night, that they were pulling this out of the contract. And Friday, they pulled this language out of the contract. So is there a negotiation process? No. But what is the most important takeaway from this is that FedEx is your partner, okay? They are as successful as they can be as long as their contractors are successful, okay? It's not us against each other. It's not like FedEx only does well if contractors do poorly. No, FedEx and contractors are swimming in the same direction, and FedEx only does as well as their contractors do. And by extension, you as a contractor will only do as well as FedEx. Now, are there years where the contract doesn't reward you as much as you want? Yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, this is what the contract looks like, okay? Every year our revenue goes up. It doesn't, inflation might be up and down and up and down, but the contract always goes up. And over time, there have been years where I've had my settlement has increased more than inflation. There's been years where my settlement has increased less than inflation. But in general, I'm still in business. I still like being a FedEx contractor, and I still have, the equity in my company has grown substantially since I started in this business. So that's the thing. That's the thought process. So anyway, so we get these slides, we get the contract. I sit there and I print it all out. So if you want to look, here are all the different schedules of the contract. And as you can see, I highlight the pages that are interesting to me or the changes that I've identified from the previous contracts. And then I talk, and I talk to lawyer friends of mine. I don't actually go out and get a lawyer to read it because that'd cost too much money, but I talk to lawyer friends. I have a pretty analytical mind myself. I talk to other contractors and we work through and say, okay, are we comfortable with these changes or do we need to push back on certain other issues? I've raised some other issues. There's a couple things that were moved around in the contract, and like I've asked a question right now that they removed. We'll go through it later, but there was a clause that they removed out, and I was like, hey, we need that clause in, and you want us to have that clause in, so can you go put that clause back in? So we'll talk about that later, but yeah, so that's the process. You review it. You have from the 18th to the 30th to review it, and then you have to sign off on it. If you do not sign off on it, then your contract terminates. Okay. You are non-renewed. So this contract automatically renews as long as you agree to accept the provisions in the contract. It's something called an evergreen. I don't know why. It's a financial term, but it just means that it always stays green. So it always renews. Maybe it's something to do with the trees. But it automatically renews. And so my contract, as long as I sign, automatically renews, and I'm a TSP going forward. If I don't, then my contract terminates by the provisions of my contract. I think my termination date is March 20th if I didn't sign the contract, but I've signed the contract. I signed it on Monday. But you have until, generally it's usually the Friday of August, the last Friday in August. So I think this year it's the 30th. So anybody who's a TSP who hasn't signed it, go ahead and sign it, okay? So let's talk about the contract. Okay, this is me reading the contract. This is not a lawyer. This is not FedEx. This is my opinions, only me, okay? I really highly recommend that everybody else reads the contract as well. But okay, let's talk about it. Really interesting. I just want to highlight to you that in the TSP, in the first page of the TSP, in paragraph E, it says AKL, that's my company, retains exclusive authority to determine best means to meet such customer expectations and demands, including complete discretion over and responsibility for routes traveled, type and number of equipment, and staffing and personnel decisions. Okay, this gets back to the heart of this National Labor Relations Board, suit against Amazon. Okay, FedEx has just made it clearly, it's my decisions. Like, they'll pay me, everything else, but it's my decisions at the end of the day about how I run my runs and how I staff my runs and how my runs get to where they need to go. FedEx might, I could go 3,000 miles out of my way to get from Memphis to Rialto. FedEx might not pay it to me, but I can take an alternate route. So that's one. Number two, in the second paragraph, TSPA 1.2, okay, this is in the base document. It says that no officer, agent, or employee of Federal Express Corporation has authority to hire, train, discipline, terminate, set compensation, yada, yada, this and yada, yada, that. So it goes back to this. FedEx is not responsible for your employees. You are responsible for your employees, okay? So those are the two big takeaways, right? You run your business and you are responsible for hiring and firing your employees. Okay, just remember that at the end of the day, you run your business, and FedEx is going to say it over and over and over again. There was a change in TSPA in paragraph 6-4 that talks about and gives more teeth to Federal Express Corporation. It gives them abilities to terminate the contract in very specific points. Okay, the contract it's really challenging for FedEx to terminate this contract unless you become a criminal enterprise. Okay, and so the provisions here specifically say if you are becoming a criminal enterprise, or are you lying about your enterprise, or are you purposely, negligently, or malignantly falsifying records. So don't do any of those things, okay? And you're going to be fine. In light of the contract and, the one FedEx and us potentially having to go into airport terminals, in TSPA 6.7, TSPA, just to remind you, is the base document, okay? So in paragraph 6, subparagraph 7, it says, I ensure access necessary for customer service. So this means if I have to go onto an airport ramp, I'm going to have to make sure I have employees that have TSA clearance, okay? And then I'm going to make sure that my drivers are appropriately badged and they maintain that badge and are carrying that badge on them at all times. there's some small changes to the language about IMVR reporting. This is your individual vehicle IVMR, individual vehicle mileage reporting. It didn't clearly state this in the past, but now it's just going back to saying, hey, you need to daily record your vehicle's mileage and you need to report it weekly to FedEx. Regardless of if you're a participant or not in the IFTA, you need to report this information to FedEx for DOT and FMCSA reporting requirements. It also gives them the ability to potentially grab that information directly from your ELD provider, though they don't have that ability yet. The language was tweaked just enough that it gives me the impression that FedEx wants to be able to pull that data that's already communicated to them from the ELD. And so they're just saying, hey, just let you know, we're going to grab this data and we're going to use it and potentially, you know what? We might no longer have to do IBMRs, so they'll take something off your plate. Another one is that in section 12.3, this is something to remember. If you go into default in excess of $25,000, FedEx Reserve, you are in FedEx's mind bankrupt, and there is a bankruptcy provision in the contract where they can terminate the contract. Okay, so pay all your bills on time. That's the big one. And then there's some more provisions in that whole section 12 and then section 15 talking about the rights that either side has to terminate the contract in different provisions. It's interesting to read to understand. It's not a change, but something that that's interesting. And then this is not a change, but something that I think is important in section 17.3. It's the conditions of a consent to assignment. That Federal Express's consent to an assignment or transfer to any entity under agreement to to Federal Express Corporation is conditioned on my company and the assignee modifying the respective agreements appropriately to reflect the transfer assignment. So what it's saying is that I have to agree and the person who's buying the contract has to agree. So it's literally saying the BD 030 that is the provision to transfer the assignment over. FedEx has to, I have to agree and submit it. The other party has to agree and execute it. And then FedEx has to stamp on it. So it's just codifying the processes. And that's where that is in the TSPA. If you were curious about where is the BD 030 come in. So in Schedule A 2.3, okay, so now we're talking about the different schedules, okay? Schedule A happens to be the run assignment schedules. Section 2.3 is going to talk about the new unassigned run process, okay? It's been, this has been in the works for years, but FedEx is getting closer to the point where they are going to be able to give out daily run assignments on the unassigned run rotation electronically instead of calling your BC up and say, hey, you know, but anyway, so they clarified this and gave more language to it and gave more teeth. They actually said that within 60 days notice, they can notify a contractor that this is the process and you all have to execute it accordingly. So it's just further expanding those tools and giving them the flexibility to institute this, which means in my mind, understanding that within the next 18 months, they will probably roll this out to a couple different hubs and they will test it out. Schedule A 4.4 talks more about the pause. We've talked about the pause in the past. It just clarifies and gives some rules. One of the things about it, it talks about the run assignment. The problem with the word assignment is that it's used for many different processes. Okay, so this just means in the pause, FedEx cannot assign you any runs and you can't take any declines. Okay, it does not mean that you're prohibited from transferring or selling a paused run. Nor does it mean that you cannot bid on CGOs with a pause run. You still have that ability, and you still have the ability to bid on runs, and you still have the ability to sell runs if they're paused. You just can't be assigned any runs to run on a daily basis. I know it's confusing, but if you want clarification, put in the Q&A and we can go over it. But just understand that it's actually a good thing that they clarified this because it means that the pause is not as scary as a lot of contractors initially thought. Schedule A 11.5 moved the availability threshold for unassigned runs from 85% back to 90%. Just so everybody knows that during COVID, we had the availability threshold move from 90 to 85. And now that we're out of COVID, it's just me bringing it back up. Schedule. Okay, so that's everything out of Schedule A. Those are all the changes, everything that I read and interpreted and said, hey, we need to be able to understand this. Realistically, there wasn't a whole lot in there that, it was actually better for us. Like there's been years past where Schedule A has been like, I don't like the way that this is going to happen. But this year I was like, okay, this is great. They're actually clarifying things and it's not as scary as I thought it was. Schedule C, Schedule B is talking about your trucks. There was no changes I saw in your trucks. So we still lease equipment to FedEx and there's still requirements on what the lease looks like. And those are on MyGroundBiz. Schedule C talks about settlement. Couple of things. Fuel mile settlement, okay? This is a negative for contractors. Fuel efficiency, the reimbursement rate that we are reimbursed at has changed from 6.8966 miles to gallon to 6.993 miles to gallon, okay? I will not give you the formula over the phone or in a webinar. If you want it, I can go over it to you. There are a number of other guys out there that also can provide, John Haldy, Tim Goff, Flint Holbrook, Dave Cooper, anybody can tell you and walk you through how to do it. Just understand that it's gone from 6.8966 to 6.993. So roughly, you want your trucks getting more than 7 miles to the gallon. Just keep that in mind. I want my trucks to get more than 7 miles to the gallon. Drop and hook increased. So on a single trailer, increased by 50 cents. On a set of doubles, it increased by $1.25, and on a set of triples, it increased by $2. And there is a caveat to that. In the contract from last year's provision is that if you do not break down your set, FedEx reserves the right to take away your drop and hook. Okay? Previously, before that, there wasn't that provision. Now they actually say that your job as a contractor is to hook up a set and break down a set. Schedule 8, sections 8.5. This is a new change. TSPs now have 7 days to turn in their toll transponders if your contract has been terminated or FedEx gives you a notification verbally or in writing. Otherwise, you can be charged the full price of your toll transponder. It's about $100. I've never been charged, but I've been told anecdotally by other contractors that that's the cost. Also in Schedule C is settlement and your settlement rates. It's also found in your settlement estimator on My Biz account or in your, there is also a report that shows every single mile and what you're paid in your VMR and MPS, miles plus, and your variable miles settlement, variable mileage rate. Just know that MPS, which is your mileage plus, went out for everybody. And that was the same amount across all contractors. Your variable mileage rate is based on your zip code that you operate out of, and it is differently. So what my experience is in Memphis, Olive Branch, and Northern Kentucky is going to be different from some contractor in Boston versus some contractor in Missoula, Montana versus some contractor in LA, California. So my opinion, I had a decent settlement increase. I actually saw about a 3.5% increase versus last year when I didn't. So I'm actually happy with my increase. Other contractors saw a bigger increase last year and saw a smaller increase this year. So net, I think it's been pretty fair over the last 2 years. Has it kept up with inflation? No, but there were a number of years before that where we were seeing increases greater than inflation. So I think net we're doing fine. Schedule D talks about optional programs. There's not as many optional programs in Linehaul as there are in the ISP world. But this one covers like your IFTA, your base plates and stuff like that. There was a change on section 1.2A. It talks about the cost of the base plates will be charged back to any payment of settlement in over 16 weeks, but you can change that if you want. You can make it quicker, you can make it less quick. But right now it's a standard of 16 weeks, and it usually occurs 2 to 3 weeks after you bring that truck on board. That was the only change I saw in Schedule D. Schedule E is driver qualification and safety. So in the major offenses in Schedule E, Section 3.3, they remove seriously bodily harm in excess of $100,000. Now it's just seriously bodily harm and death and dismemberment. So I don't know if that's better or worse. Just know that you really don't want to get into an accident and you don't want to have a driver that causes serious bodily harm. The other thing is that Section E, Schedule E 3.3, Section 7 also clarified that we will not assign personnel involved in a fatality to operate a C&B. So if you have a driver that has been involved in a fatality, they're banned for life. No ifs, ands, or buts, or coconuts. Background check also, which is Schedule E, Section 5. They've clarified that your employee cannot be a former drug dealer, and now they can't be in the possession, distribution, manufacture, or sale of controlled substances or alcohol or other crimes. Before it just was something else, but now they've clarified that all these different roles in being a drug dealer are no-go. If you didn't understand being a drug dealer was a bad thing in the first place. Schedule E, Schedule 8.5. So these just expand that you have to provide notice in writing to FedEx in certain areas. Safety technology, upon request, a TSP will have to certify in writing or demonstrate visually compliant as requested by Federal Express Corporation from time to time. So they might say, "Hey, we don't think you actually have vetters in your trucks. Please certify in writing or show us that you have." The other thing is that we authorize our vetter provider to furnish to Federal Express Corporation or give it access to my data that is de-identified. What does that mean? It means that it's like the face is all blurry and aggregated with multiple sources. So they can't just see AK or like my company's data. What they're going to do is they're going to take Josh's data and my data and Joe Schmo's data and John Smith's data, and they're going to put it all together. So they get to see the data and get to see the trends that in their entire fleet. They just don't know which contractor it's occurring with, and they can't see the faces of the drivers. And then the real big one and the most important one to know is that as it stands right now, the rear end collisions, the indemnification for rear end collisions has been moved from Schedule G, Section 2.32C to Schedule G 2.32D. And what does that mean? It means that we've lost the $2,000 cap on indemnifications, and now we're at a $35,000 cap on indemnification. So if you are in a rear end collision, you can be charged up to $35,000 instead of $2,000. So regardless of if you have FCAM, and if your driver has been participating in a monthly safety training, you can still get, and you have a working camera, because those used to be the 3 provisions required to get the $2,000 indemnification. Regardless of that, you can be hit with a $35,000 indemnification. So what does this mean for your business? Unless FedEx agrees to change this, and there are a number of contractors that have brought this up, that this is a risk that we cannot insure, you need to either have a line of credit in excess of $35,000, or you need to have in a savings account for your company $35,000 at a minimum at all times. Okay, rear end collisions are decreasing because we all have FCAM on our trucks now, but they still happen, and you do not want your company to go bankrupt because FedEx comes up to you and says, "Hey, you just had a rear end collision. We need $35,000."
Yeah.
Fair enough, Josh?
A big one. Yeah. Cause like you said, FCAM in theory helps prevent a lot of the rear end collisions, but you don't just hope that saves you from a collision. Like you're completely right there, that it's just something that unless contract changes or somehow an insurance policy changes to accommodate it, which we don't see a way to do right now, then you insure yourself by essentially having the cash flow sitting and waiting just in case. It's just kind of the what you've got to have.
And there's a couple things to understand. I mean, I don't know if this is their intent behind it, but have been anecdotes out there that drivers have been disconnecting their F-cams or blocking their F-cams or wrapping them in tinfoil or putting chewing gum on the connection in the back. I mean, at the end of the day, the new F-cams that are out there on these 2020 to 2024 models really actually work and save lives. I had a driver. This totally happened. I had a driver fall asleep on the road. The truck actually pulled him over to the shoulder and stopped the vehicle.
Wow.
Safety technology works. Okay, so you should always be having your BCs, or if you don't have a BC, you should be physically checking to make sure that your F-cams are working. It's really good technology, and I highly recommend, if you want to be a really safe operator, get with Bendix, get with Wingman, get with Meritor, get with Detroit, and get their side radars, because the number one cause of accidents right now in the FedEx fleet is side swipes, and Wingman Fusion or your side radar or blind spotter, which are some of the different names of these technology, really work, and they cut down on your side swipes. Like, knock on wood, I had a bad run of side swipes in 2022, and I made the investment. It cost me about $1,500 per truck. But I went in and bought hockey pucks or the blind spotters for all my trucks, and I have not had a side swipe since.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, even if the indemnification hadn't changed, I mean, it only affects rear end, but still, just little things like that. Even if you're indemnified and FedEx protects you on the cost, having a truck goes down and having to deal with a truck in the shop is never worth it. Or somebody getting hurt, like a driver getting hurt. It is an investment, but it's one that saves your truck, saves cash flow, but also more importantly saves lives, like you said. So sometimes it's going one step beyond the required safety technology to find what is the best for your business.
Yeah. And I think blind spot is a big one. I mean, even if you're capped at the $2,000 indemnification, that's just for who you did damage to. It doesn't cap your own damages.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, for me, like, I have a $5,000 insurance. I pay the first deductible. Sorry, I have a $5,000 deductible. So if I lose a tire or lose two tires on a side swipe, that's $1,000 out of my pocket right there, easily, if not more. Like, if I have to replace both tires in the rim, that's a $2,000 job right there. So me spending that kind of money is just me making an investment on my business to make sure that I don't have that potential liability in the future.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess in general, what are your kind of overall feelings on the TSPE this year?
Well, I mean, so the big one is that FedEx listened to us contractors and said, hey, we need to make this change, because at the end of the day, we do not want to hamstring our contractors. And so that just gave me confidence that, hey, FedEx wants me to succeed. They understand. I mean, they might not always get it right, and they might, think that this is the way the contract needs to go, but not understand the repercussions of their language. But at the end of the day, they will listen to us, and they will make the changes necessary for us to operate a solid business in a environment that we can categorize and quantify that risk. So that was important. Two, I thought the settlement increases were really fair. Like I said, I mean, I had a reasonable increase on my solo rates. I had a reasonable increase on my team rates. I have already done some pay raises throughout the year. I will probably, I'm going to reevaluate my pay scale versus the markets. So I'm going to talk to somebody like Tony at Bright Flag or some other recruiting company and just say, hey, what do you see as the going rate for drivers in, the Memphis market or the Olive Branch market or the Noki market, and determine, okay, do I need to increase? Do I not? But also, I have to caveat that with, I know that truck prices are probably going to go up $5,000 to $6,000 this year. So I need to capture that and make sure I, based off of what my fleet upgrade plan is, take some of that settlement increase and start allocating it to my truck replacement fleet truck replacement fleet kitty, call it,
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of, there's pros and cons to every year seeing what FedEx changes and doesn't change in the language. But I think ultimately the biggest thing that I saw as a positive this year is exactly what you said, is that they changed based on feedback, and they changed really quickly for what we often see from FedEx. Like that wasn't like okay, we'll think about this, we'll consult with our lawyers, and we'll get back to you on like the next contract. That was a realization that this is a big issue and challenge for people, and it has to be a change this year, and they changed it. So I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, that was the way that worked out and the speed of it. And so, like you said, we want this to always be a situation where there's communication both ways, and that we find ways to increase the value of the model for everyone. Everybody puts together.
And, I think, like FedEx is in the business of delivering packages, or sorry, I take it back. FedEx is in the business of collecting and sorting packages. We are in the business of delivering those packages to the customers, and FedEx, it's a symbiotic relationship. We are not a parasite, and we are not a disease that FedEx is looking to lance. Like FedEx needs us to succeed. And you see it all the time. Like when you have your conversations with your senior manager, at least on the line haul side, we're always talking about, okay, hey, how do we go after more business? What are our customers looking at? They want to know that we're safe operators, so they don't want to see FedEx trucks in the news, like, hitting a school bus. They want to know that we are delivering packages on time. So they want to know that, hey, what is the service rate from Memphis to Woodbridge, New Jersey? How often are those trailers making it there by 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 4 a.m., from a dispatch the night before? And then they want to know, how often are we, failing to make those packages get there? And that's our goal, and that's our responsibility as contractors, is that we get evaluated on how safe our operations are, how often we make our tractors available, and how often we make sure our tractors deliver the trailers on time. And that's what customers care about the most. So the more successful we are as TSPs in doing that, the more successful FedEx is able to win more business, which means that there's more compensation that FedEx can share with us. And it's a sharing process. It's not like FedEx just takes, oh, this is my pot of gold and you guys don't get any. No, it's a split. They take the revenue increase on a yearly basis, and they say, here's some that goes to the TSPs, here's some that goes to the ISPs, and here's some that goes to the shareholders.
And that's ultimately how the business is run. And we can always, give our feedback if we think that there are changes that need to be made. And ultimately, we're trying to keep that communication line open. So that
and I would say that's a big difference between us and the Amazon model, because I don't know. I actually have no idea if Amazon actually tries to make money on package delivery, but FedEx, that's, at the end of the day, that's FedEx's bread and butter. Bread and butter is to make money on delivering packages.
Yeah, that's a great point. That, it's just one of those things where Amazon is comfortable running at a loss if they need to for any of their various business lines, but ultimately FedEx, that this is their business line. So they need it to be successful. Perfect. So that's really what I wanted to cover around the contract. Really appreciate it, Alex. We've got a couple of questions that are in, and we'll get to the Q&A in just a second. Quick updates on a couple of things before we get to the Q&A. 3 new listings this week for anyone who's still looking. They are all P&D listings. So the first one is out of Texas. It is 9 P&D routes at $1,050,000. It is 15 employees, and it is one where it's a good opportunity for kind of a hands-on contractor to come in. There's no manager with this one, but there are spare trucks and spare drivers as well. Next one's out of Florida. Next 2 are actually out of Florida. So if you're looking for Florida, we got 2 more coming. So one is for 14 routes at 1.6 million with 13 employees and a manager, and mainly newer fleet as well on that one. And the second one is 14 routes at 1.5 million. This is 18 employees and a manager, and a really low mileage operation. So 2 in Florida, 1 in Texas. If you're interested in any of those, reach out to our team. We can give you all the details. And 2 quick reminders on upcoming events. If you are still a new contractor or trying to get into the space for the first time, really, we host new investor summits throughout the year. and our next one is actually on September 27th. It is in our office in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you're interested in that, we can send you the link. You can go on our website and find it. But it is coming up now and about a month away. So if you're trying to figure out if this is the right space for you, and if you're also trying to decide if P&D or line haul is the right fit for you, we'll talk through those differences. Alex isn't biased at all, but he does enjoy line haul. So that's the next event for new investors. Also, if you're in the Denver area, we do have a happy hour coming up on September 10th, completely free to attend. And it is just basically a time to network with other contractors and new entrants into the space or looking to get into the space. We'll have free food, free drink. So if you want to come out in a couple of weeks, you can come meet us there in Denver.
I'll be there.
Alex will be there. It's in his backyard. We're doing it just for Alex. So if you want to go.
Well, we'd be doing just for Alex, you'd be doing it in Highlands Ranch, but I'll make the 15-minute drive into Denver for this.
Yes, yes, the strenuous drive that we.
You know what? It's much better location over by me. I have fly fishing, I got mountain biking,
What
closer
were
to
we thinking?
I know.
Made it a whole weekend. Yeah. And quickly, if you're interested in either the Denver event or that new investor summit, we sent that link into the chat so you can click on it there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 10 minutes and a few questions here that I want to kind of make sure we get to all of them. So the first one is a quick one. The company that you were referring to that can kind of give you the going.
Yeah. So this is a company that I've used in the past. It's Bright Flag Recruiting. I don't currently use them right now, but that's more because it's not because I don't love Tony Tovey. I think she does an excellent job. I got to the point where I was able to start hiring an internal recruiter into my own company. But I think Bright Flag Recruiting is excellent and highly recommend giving Tony a call. She's a great resource. She has the pulse on just about every market in the US and can give you an idea about what do team drivers make, what do AM solo drivers make, what do spot drivers make, and what do PM solo drivers make. So that's Bright Flag Recruiting. And it's all one word, Bright Flag, all one word. Yeah.
And if you can't find them for some reason after searching or you need a contact, we can always send you a referral and help you get connected with Tony over there so you can reach out to us. Second question though from Gio is, so you said when you're talking through that, you said that runs were paused. What did you mean? What's a pause? What's a paused run?
Okay, so FedEx has given a provision now where a mutually agreement between FedEx and the contractor, you can pause an unassigned run. So what it means is that you have a spot on the unassigned run rotation, and every day that the rotation spins, you're supposed to provide a driver and a tractor to get dispatched. Well, for whatever reason, say you have maintenance issues, say the business is not, or say that FedEx is not calling your tractor enough, that you can come up and agree on a mutually pause for a certain time, excuse me. And during that time, you will not be offered any runs to run on the unassigned run rotation, but you will not take any declines either. And so it's a mutually beneficial situation to both you and FedEx. And then after that point in time, say 30, 60, 90 days, your tractor comes back onto the schedule and you start getting offered runs to run on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or whatever, however much FedEx needs. And you can start taking declines again. So that's the definition of a paused run. And it is a written agreement between you and FedEx, and it will have a start date and an end date to it.
Yeah. And that's actually a really nice benefit for those who have unassigned runs and you run into some kind of situation where you won't be able to staff it or you won't be able to send that run out. Then this is just a way to not have your contract get hurt. And it is actually a nice mechanic to just basically everybody agrees, we won't call you. We also won't get mad at you until you're ready. So, okay, a couple of questions here from Daniel. We don't have to go into all the detail, but just quickly, what are the required insurances?
So it's really quickly, as a line haul operator, you need to have non-trucking liability and FISDAM or physical damage. You need to have employment EPLI, which is employment liability insurance.
Yeah.
And then you need to have workers' comp. Those are the minimums that you need to have. Now, I recommend that everybody should get an umbrella policy on their corporation, but you don't have to have that. The only three that you need to have are FISDAM, non-trucking liability, EPLI, and then workers' comp. And if you have any questions about that, one, FedEx has a captive insurance company that they highly recommend and encourage contractors to use called Marsh. Or if you're a smart guy, you're going to give a guy like David Campbell a call and say, hey, can you save me some money from using Marsh? But there's Marsh out there, there's David Campbell, and there is a ton of others. There's H&I, there's Brian O'Connor with Paradiso, Dave Clayton with Pine something or other. I mean, there's a ton out there.
Yeah, and we work with Steve at OBD.
Yeah.
So like, we can help you with all of those questions, but that's the important thing is there are a few required. And then depending on your situation, like the bank you're working with or how you set up your risk profile, there might be others you add, but FedEx only requires those three. And one of the nice ones you don't have to pay for is liability insurance, which is kind of what we're pointing at, because you operate under FedEx's DOT number.
Daniel, my biggest recommendation is either get on the Route Consultants Facebook page or go to the Linehaul Facebook page. There's two of them, Route Consultants or Linehaul, and just put in there, I need insurance help, and you will get probably about 50 messages within 30 seconds. So
that is true.
My biggest recommendation there. But you can use Marsh or you can use somebody else. You know, just shop around. You're going to get some great offers.
Yeah.
What schedules require the most attention? You really should read all 87 pages of the TSP and its schedules. I will say this, you can ignore Schedule B, except when you're trying to bring tractors on. You just want to make sure that your tractor is correct. I will say you can probably get away with not reading Schedule D. Schedule A is talking about your run assignment and how the runs operate and how do you bid and get awarded runs. Schedule B is your tractor. Schedule C is your settlement. So you're going to want to know how you're going to get paid and what you're getting paid for. Schedule D talks about base plates and IFTA. So if you're going to do those on your own, then you can ignore Schedule D pretty much. Schedule E will tell you the do's and do nots for your drivers and for your business. Like how can you violate the contract and get it terminated for not having safe operating practices? So you definitely need to read Schedule E. There is no Schedule EF. There is no Schedule F. I don't know if has there ever been a Schedule F?
No, there have been. I think a lot of those letters, they will like have it for a period of time, and instead of restructuring the letters, because people get used to certain letters, they just delete the letter and then you just skip the letter forever.
Schedule G is really important. That's your insurance. That tells you what requirements what are you required to have insurance wise, and what FedEx indemnifies you for. So as we've talked about in the past, as a linehaul contractor or as a TSP, you operate under FedEx's DOT authority. What does this mean? It means that FedEx provides the insurance for trucking liability. So if you are under a load, if you're pulling trailers, or if you're dispatched bobtail, at those points in time, when you are under dispatch, you are operating under FedEx's DOT authority. Okay? In those situations, if you get into an accident, FedEx provides the insurance. Now, if you're going from a parking lot to FedEx, you are not under dispatch in that situation. You are actually moving your tractor from its parking position to where it's working. That is called non-trucking liability. That is what you need to actually have insurance for. And that's where you provide your own liability insurance. That's usually more along the lines of like auto liability insurance. Okay. Trucking liability that's where, like, if you are driving a tractor and a trailer down the highway and you get into a massive collision, where, those can be multi-million-dollar judgments. That's where FedEx is providing your insurance. So Schedule G is really important to read. And then there is nothing else until you get to Schedule J. Schedule J is very specific, and it's a contract between you and FedEx for a temporary run assignment or for a peak enhancement where they're giving you something called a Schedule J enhancement, where they're going to pay you a set fee per week to provide a certain amount of tractors for a set period of time.
And there's so much more, but I think that's the right kind of call out on how to think about it. But in a perfect world, you really should read it all. Now, Daniel, this is last question here in our last 30 seconds. If you want to try to blitz this answer, which is hard to blitz, but you said, if I don't have enough drivers to complete my runs, are they turned into unassigns?
So if you have dedicated runs, okay, and you do not have a driver to run your run, you are going to notify FedEx that you're declining your run. In that situation, FedEx is going to take that run and give it to somebody on the unassigned run rotation. If you take too many declines, if you go below 95% on your declines, that means that you are now tier 2 and you're going to get a warning. If you go below 90%, FedEx is going to give you an opportunity to cure, and you will have 45 days to respond, to notify them, like, how are you going to staff your tractors? How are you going to make sure? And you're going to give them a letter of assurance that you are not going to take another decline until you get above that 90% threshold again. And that can last for, and then, if you don't, you lose your run, and FedEx will take your run and they will award it to another contractor. And it's happened. I've never been on the losing end, but I've been on the gaining end. I've seen them take runs away from other contractors and post them as CGOs, which is a contractor growth opportunity. And I converted an unassigned run into a dedicated run in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all kinds of underlying mechanics there around, how that works. But I think for now, that's the right answer. And
yeah, I mean, if you really want to get more involved with that, reach out to Josh and we can set up a consulting call and we can actually talk about the mechanics there. That's really Schedule A, and there's a lot to take and it's not very clear, but I can walk you through all that.
Yeah.
Or Josh can walk you through that too.
Yeah, we can do it together, Alex. Perfect. But Alex, thank you so much for being here and providing kind of this context and your knowledge on all of this as contractors are trying to figure out, what they should be paying attention to in this new model, and new contractors coming in, trying to figure it all out at the same time. So again, really appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure. I really enjoy this. I really enjoy talking to other contractors. I really enjoyed meeting a lot of people who've been watching the videos at the expo. It was really a pleasure to hear from them and know that they've made the right decision to get into line haul. Made the right decision to get into line haul and looking to grow. I've heard a lot of success stories, so it's great. And I'm glad that a lot of guys are making their dreams come true by becoming entrepreneurs and achieving success in this space.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for being here, and thank everybody else for being on or watching later. So we will see all of you next week on the next. And Daniel, I saw that if you just email josh@routeconsultant.com, we can talk. I've still got one of the easiest emails, so it's easy to find me. Josh@routeconsultant.com. But other than that, we'll see everybody on our next webinar next week. And again, if you're in Denver or looking to come to one of those new investor summits, just let us know. But in Denver, you'll get to see Alex. So that's really
what? Is the 7th a Wednesday? Can we do the podcast from the actual,
probably, is it a Wednesday? No, the 4th is a Wednesday. Yeah, I know. Almost had it.
It's a live, we could do a live podcast, kind of make ourselves feel like we're really special, have question and answer and
yeah, we could. Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it anyway. We can make it happen. So. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Alex. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Good night. Have a good evening.